That's hilarious, my dudes. We're going to be switching this over to the main camera now. Welcome, my dudes. So I'm just setting up the live. We're doing a multi-stream across. Right now it's Twitter or X, YouTube. We try to do Insta, but I guess you have to do Instagram. You have to have like your Facebook account, like where you can go live. They have not approved me for that yet. And the same thing for TikTok. TikTok has to approve live. So we've applied for it. So we'll be live on TikTok on this multi-stream on the next one. But it's funny because when you're setting up this for a multi-stream, you fill out like, what's the topic? And today's topic is going to be just an Ask Me Anything. I've have compiling a handful of things that have been asked, most recently through either DMs or people emailing us. A kind of common list of questions we'll start with, and then we'll get into like people can ask questions and stuff live, because that's really where it comes from. From an AMA, you guys need to be able to ask something and then I can respond to it. But it's funny that the title was the last time I went live on a multi-stream, which was when's the ETH POS going to happen? The move to a proof of stake, and it did not update my title. So I'm laughing because like I went live and that's the title that was up, and I was like, oh man, it's been a minute since I went to a multi-stream with multiple sites. So welcome, my dudes. I haven't done one of these in a minute, and I think it's a good opportunity to kind of go through kind of the state of where things are at and go through some kind of key questions that I keep getting repeatedly, especially in the with our move to be heavy Bitcoin mining specific, with some of the larger sites, and then, talk through some of the GPU mining stuff that, we still have some miners on, and then, just around proof of work in general. But I want to kind of broaden this discussion around, where we're at right now in the stack from, the industry, where things are moving, what are some of the challenges and stuff we've worked through, and then, open it up to the floor and allow some folks to ask some questions. Right now I have it up on YouTube for the questions. We're working on getting this to where I can see multiple, where you guys are asking questions. So if you want to ask something right now, please do it on YouTube. And you can watch it on Twitter or X, and we'll get to getting those things answered for you guys. So let's go. Let's get right into it. I'm going to start with a couple things that have been asked through emails, and when I said I was going to do an AMA, what folks just started shooting me stuff right away. And then I've had Danielle, our marketing focused individual, like to help kind of collate some of those key questions that people are asking. So one that keeps getting asked to us is like, what's been the biggest challenge over the last year? There's a lot of change in the industry when it comes to like mining profitability, and then just a lot of the GPU coins getting down to the point that, from a sustainable operation, spec mining is still here. Spec mining is never going to go away. People are going to always speculative mine new stuff coming out. That's how most of this started, when we were mining back in 2013 and having a YouTube channel with you guys. We were mining Dogecoin, we were mining Litecoin, script. There was different algorithms. It was fun to tweak and adjust things and understand on how, mining and proof of work really worked in those days. And now the evolution of where things have went, you have things like Caspa out there. You have, still got mining with Flux. You got Ravencoin. You got all these other like attempts at trying to change some of the feature set or add to the feature set of what you can't do with Bitcoin, while holding to an L1 kind of, fork from Bitcoin, base core operation and functionalities there, but then with some added enhancements. So you still have your spec side out there, and then you have, a more industrial approach now to scale when it comes to Bitcoin. And, one that comes from us is when you start to expand in this space, you learn a lot, and you can have everything kind of dialed in, and just the little things eat you alive, right? So if you have like a bad batch of miners, or if you have an adjustable power rate, you have things that can really impact you. You got to have a plan set and most of your stuff done to the point that you can go and execute. But there's all these little things that you have to work through. There is no free lunch in this space. Anybody that's mining knows this. There's a lot of work. It's manual. A lot of it's manual labor. A lot of it's also greenfielding, meaning like people are kind of inventing best practices on, mining and getting better and sharing information and finding more, better ways to handle like filtration, handle heat, what to do in circumstances where you have like, potential changes in your power costs, that kind of stuff. So, one of the biggest challenges for us this year has been really the bringing on a few new sites and having one that just the joint. It was a joint venture. It wasn't the power rates weren't what they need, what they were said to be, and just kind of discovering that as we're going. And even with all the due diligence with getting where things would be at from a power, and then having that for a few months, and then, a power company coming in and saying, hey, well, we can change this. And by the way, we are changing this. It gives you and hardens a lesson that really understanding the district and the power agreements that you're in, understanding what is variable and what is fixed in that. And just sometimes it's about not just about asking the question, but really playing it out in a scenario. And it's really given us a good baseline to then work with other folks and say, hey, here's where we've been burned, and here's where what you can ask for and how you need to ask it. I've talked about this on demand charges for folks that have, like when they first get their agreement set up, not understanding, like if you start in the middle of a month and you're in the middle of a bill cycle, certain things like your consumption may be charged appropriately, your CP and NCP rates, your taxes, all that to be correct, but your demand charge will be charged over the 30 days, right? And you get those kind of situations where you'll get your bill and you're like, like, why is this more than what I was expecting? And it end up finding out that, well, you turned on mid-month and that sets a level, and then you're paying for that for the whole month. At that level. So they take whatever that peak is and just times it by the potential use for 31 days as an example. And then even though you were only running for 14 days, things like that, especially when you're first starting to expand or you're building a mining farm, might hurt very badly for folks. And in our case, it was, multiple meetings with the power company. We thought everything was good to go. And it was just the understanding of, like, we turned on 2 containers in the middle of the month. We turned on the last 2 containers at the end of the month, literally the last day. We were about 8 hours away from, by the time we lit, that it spiked the energy from 2.5 meg to 4.3 meg. And then when our power bill came, 8 days later, it was, you are paying at 4.3 megawatts for the whole month. And that was a difference of like $65,000 to give you guys an idea of like the impact of that. So if like you're not expecting to pay 65, that ate up more than what we had earned, and now you're on the hook for $30,000-$40,000 that you aren't anticipating to have to pay. So those kind of lessons learned, those are the biggest challenges. Is that all of the detail, it's not as linear as you would like it to be, because there's a lot of nuance in each of the cost structures of certain things. So really getting your plan together and understanding that, it's what drove us to, on BitsBeTrippin, shout out for what we're doing. I know there's several other folks doing it too, but sit down with somebody if you're going to do this, if you're planning an operation, and consult with folks that are doing it. So if it's somebody like us, you can sit there and right at the top there, you can hit our solutions and services. Again, do your own research. There's a ton of other people also doing it, sometimes in your particular area, and sit down, spend an hour with them. And it may help you not miss something like that. And that's like, there wasn't anybody in our area doing it. Like, I've been in this space for a while, since 2013, doing it at scale since early 2016, from the BBT farm up in Wisconsin, having 2,500 GPUs, 700 plus rigs, close to 3 megawatts of power use. Learned a lot during that time at kind of the scaling side, and then what impacts you. So those are the biggest challenges, having everything out in front of you, of what you're going to be cost, and then modeling that moving forward. You have to have your models if you're trying to scale something up. One of the other questions that came in, and I'm going to go and look at the chat here shortly, guys, and take some stuff from the chat, but I'm going through what we have compiled here. What's some of the common misconceptions people have about cryptocurrency mining? It's a great question. I think that people hear and see the TikToks and see some of us, making content and videos, and think that it's a one-click solution, set it and forget it, and not realize that the problems and the things you run into, especially you guys out there in the GPU mining aspect, we know this for years. Part of the fun is the problems, like having to work through stuff, figure out, do you have a riser issue? Is the GPU not right? Is the software wrong? If you're using a broker service, something like NiceHash, how that works, how's the fees work, that you kind of live it, and you put way more time into learning and discovering and kind of separating what your end goal is on the mining aspects. A lot of folks speculative mine. They see some new coins come out. I'm a very pro spec miner for a multitude of reasons, not just for what you're thinking of, like, oh, let's get into the coin early and maybe it blows up. It's also understanding kind of what do they bring into the table? How do they launch? What's different? Did they fork it from another coin? What's their value proposition? Are they bringing a new feature set that's there? Because that's how you get to new things, right? Any kind of new emergence of a way to do things off that baseline and premise. Even Bitcoin wasn't just born, Satoshi just didn't born it out of nowhere. You had Adam Black, you had Nick Saban, you have Saban, football, Szabo. You have a lot of core references. If you look at the Bitcoin white paper, where Hashcash, where some of the, from proof of work, the concepts that came together to where Satoshi was able to put a lot of these already works in place to then get it to where we're at from a Bitcoin, from an incentive, and having some of those mechanisms in place that makes sense from a financial structure, from the hardest money on the planet, the concepts of decentralization, no single point of failure, all these core principles that make Bitcoin what it is. It came from the works and the collaboration of, a lot of that effort that then get serialized into a new thing. And I think I look at that on some of these spec coins, and I've always done that, right? I've looked at what's the value prop. And I mean, sometimes memes are memes, my dudes. Like, people are going to make shit coins and funny meme coins, and there's a whole group of individuals that are going to live, and that's what they do, and that's fine. I mean, that's having diversity in the space, but it's a differentiation of folks that are trying to wreck your wallet and take your money, and separating the fact that, hey, it's funny to buy a few meme coins for $5, but if you're YOLOing $5,000 into it, you're probably going to get wrecked, right? Like, it's set up to take your money. So it's really separating kind of what are you putting your attention and effort to. I look at it a little differently, not just the money aspect. I'm like, what am I going to put my time into? What am I going to learn something new from? Circumstantially, I may make money on some of it. But like, am I going to, put a lot of effort and attention in learning what, somebody has and what somebody's doing with it? I think it's still a healthy ecosystem. I think GPU mining forever is going to be there in some speculative form. When you look at the value proposition on that and just GPUs, you have a very low cost of entry for people to participate. You have a massive opportunity of decentralization with it, because you have one network to many people that can participate around the world. And you can, look no further than Ethereum. Ethereum really set the pace when it came to GPU mining. And I do not think personally, and granted, I'm always going to be put into a spot of like we're pro miners. So like, I'm always going to say something to pro mining, but I look at it more from just engagement, folks participating, using a network. And you look at Ethereum, it really hasn't done much. From a feature set, it's like a solution looking for a problem versus, having this organic community that was part of it and supporting it on the mining side. They went for proof of stake, and essentially they alienated an entire swath of individuals that were participating in upholding the network, and they've indirectly became extremely centralized, right? Essentially, Ethereum is running on the three main primary world clouds. Like most of the nodes, the operator, it's a cost breakdown structure to and risk factor. If you're hosting coins inside of a wallet, you're inheriting the security layer on a cloud. So it makes sense that it would eventually rotate up to the world's clouds being it. And it gives it an existential threat if something was to occur from a regulatory standpoint, and then overnight, they can have that network, not shut down, because people can still lift and shift their VMs and their Kubernetes. If it's virtualized, they're having a virtualized node, they can move it, restand it up somewhere else. But it's there's some existential threat there. So it's the difference and so the divergence of these networks from proof of work. I think you start running into centralization risk, right? So crypto mining in general, proof of work is not going anywhere. It's going to be here from the basic principles of, individuals being able to participate. So I think that, long way of saying misconceptions of cryptocurrency mining is it's easy. And there's free cheddar out there. Nothing's free on it. You're putting hardware on task, and you're receiving coins that happen to be worth capital, like exchange, with some services coming in to where you can spend it with the coin itself. I'll move on to a couple more questions here, and then I'm gonna start taking some stuff from the crowd. So if you guys have been adding some questions here, I'm gonna be looking at the chat here. We'll look through here. What are you, let's see here. What's your take on the current power consumption of mining? Can mining be profitable in 2024? Let's see. I'm just looking through some of these other questions. Can you walk us through your process when working with a new mining client? How would you think mining would change over the next 5 years? I mean, there's a lot of good questions here. I'll see if I can just rapid fire them. How do you think mining will change over the next 5 years? I think we're going to see an expansion into this space. So let's think of the components. Think of things like little capability bubbles. Think of what drives people to mining, and how many people can join that kind of that group to where you're incentivized to do it. So if you have a space where, and I'm taking America as a kind of a core liquidity center that will drive price up because new regulatory things happen to allow other capital to come into this space. So if we have a bipartisan bill that's already made it through Congress, through House and Senate, and it was vetoed by Biden, if that goes back through, and if it remains Harris, I'm not going to get into politics, but if it remains to where it goes back through and it's eventually approved, one of the key components of that bill allowed custodial services to be down at a bank. If a mom and pop, you're just walking into your bank, you log in and you can have Bitcoin right from the bank, right when you're logging in. And this really is, I'm not going to also get into the debate of banks can go away. I'm looking at just the mechanics of what happened. If you have every bank in the country, in the world, that now is integrated, has the fabric integrated to where you can buy, sell, and trade Bitcoin through the liquidity center and not have to go through an exchange, it changes everything. Because for them to be able to sell you Bitcoin, they're either going to have an API back to an exchange, or they're going to have to hold it, at the center. And then if you have the banked people. So we're talking a subset of society of people that have bank accounts. They have the opportunity to purchase Bitcoin, or any of the other cryptocurrencies. Let's say they have Ethereum, they have whatever in there. You now have this mechanism to where you have access to the chance that liquidity may be done at a much more larger scale, to where you don't have to go to an exchange, give a whole bunch of KYC, ML stuff. You already have a bank account for the banked people, and you just have way quicker symmetry of access to it. So that puts a different calculus to the demand curve. So I'm looking at that as kind of an input. So if that input happens, that drives demand, drives price higher. Price higher on proof of work networks means more participants can be part of it, which means you have an expansion in mining. And maybe this is publicly traded companies doubling down, tripling down, buying up more hardware. And if the sea does rise, all boats when it comes to the understanding of like what the difference of the network types are, meaning if you have a fair market launched cryptocurrency that is not a security, it's a commodity, and that gets bucketed into a market basket with other coins. And we already see this already. You have ETFs for other types of coins, and there is a differential that's been known about fair market launch versus pump and dumps. And they look from a risk security standpoint. You have an opportunity where there could be a situation where like other coins are put into part of market baskets because they have confidence that there's a better distribution model on it, and it's not centralized to one entity. And now you have an opportunity to where these other proof of work coins start gaining value. I'm looking at Litecoin, I'm looking at Dogecoin, I'm looking at Raven, I'm looking at things like Caspa. Caspa, like it's not on any major exchanges yet. That still kind of concerns me, just because they've had time. It's had a lot of price movement, but it just hasn't gotten any major exchanges. They do a lot of vetting before they put layer one coins onto an exchange, because it's a little more it's a little more heavier for them because it's the proof of work, the way it works. On the L1 side, they have to do a lot of security audits to include it. So Caspa still's not on any of the major exchanges, which kind of, I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, Ravencoin's not on Coinbase. It's on all the other major exchanges. It's not on Coinbase. So, I mean, it could be 6.5 dozen other on risk, but, there's things like that are kind of the quality gates. That means somebody's done audits. They've been able to put it on there. So once I think that regulatory framework is in place to where you can have more of normal mom and pop, I'm talking not the crypto bros. I'm not talking about people that want to remain unbanked. That's great. I mean, that's an option. You don't have to be beholden to a system. That's fine. That's great. That's part of having a diverse society. But I try to tend to focus on things that are concrete, on the ability to raise capital, the ability to be a participant in this space, and operate on a business aspect. That is where I kind of look at it, like in the more structure that allows capital to flow in will provide more opportunity for folks to be able to go raise capital, maybe locally, to say, hey, I have the skills and the smarts to be able to deploy assets to help the security network of Bitcoin or one of these other tokens. And here's my business plan, and I'm going to operate it. And here's my rate of return. And I'm going to pay my power this way. I'm going to pay this way to pay down my liabilities. And I'm going to have this, I'm going to be a security provider for a network. And that's the way we usually present it to folks in general, like banks or anybody else are like, hey, you're a crypto miner. What's that mean? Well, it means you're a security provider for the network. And for that security you're providing, you are paid in a token. It's a regular payout. I don't have to go ask for it. It shows up as being a participant. And then we're able to pay our liabilities that way, and just educating them. So I think as that starts to get more education, the future 5-year on Bitcoin, crypto, that's proof of work especially, gets its visibility and comfortability as people start to understand that more. Then I think mining expands. I think it expands across the world, and it's going to be this whole, like, how much is power, who can participate level from a cost standpoint. I'm going to switch over. I see Red Panda's here. What's up, my dude? Question: how would residential miners try to lower their electric rate? Even use a certain amount demand charge? What you have seen recently? So there's a couple different ways to do it. Most people, when we talk to folks that have smaller setups, maybe they brought a 400 amp service into their house, or their, maybe a garage, that kind of thing. Single phase power. Most of the time you can, if you set up a small business, you can get a commercial rate. So I would first recommend looking at what the commercial rate versus your residential rate is. And can you get commercial power, even single phase, into your property if you set up an LLC or a small business at your residence? So people set up home businesses all the time. And if it's just blending the lines with the power company of making sure you get to the right business person. So they'll have people at power companies that are on the small business side to support you. It's a matter of just talking to them and saying, yeah, hey, this is a house and this is a new vector where normally commercial service is only in like commercially zoned areas. But at the end of the day, it's a paperwork exercise on on a single. I'm talking just single phase. On single phase power, it's just a paperwork exercise at the utility. Meaning, like it's a matter of changing the understanding that commercial businesses can be at home, and that you should be able to get a commercial power rate at home. Now, we've been able to successfully do that with a few folks. Just on behalf of them, people called us. We did like a couple-hour retainer, made a few calls to the power company, and got to the right people to just explain, like, yes, normally commercially zoned spaces is where you do commercially power. And then that's one way to drop it. So in that case that we've helped with, we were able to help them get from 12 cents down to 6 cents peak, down to 6 cents in the evening. So it was a cheaper rate in a relatively higher area, about 25% savings from a phone call. But that person had to get a business set up. You can do sole proprietor, you could do, and if we're talking in the US, but this is kind of universal speak, right? If they do separate their power from commercial to residential, if you can get a small business at your house, you can get it in some circumstances reduced to a commercial rate. To get into the really competition rates of like 4 and 3 cent, and especially around the peak times where you have more of a flat curve on cost on your power all in, you really need 3-phase to do that, and they do it based on load factor. So you need a high load factor, which just means you're going to be on all the time. So that's what all your load factor means. Let's say you have 85% uptime over a year period. For our rates here, that we have the 4.1 cent all in, and right now we're about 4.3 because there was some cost adjustment on it. So now we're operating at around 4.3 rate here in Illinois. But the high load factor required us to have 75% of at least 1.5 megawatt out of our 5 megawatt allocation. So cumulatively, I have to show 1.5 throughout a 12-month period. So like there's sometimes we will step down the power, for curtailments and stuff. So cumulatively, even if I'm using 4.3 megawatts, like it'll show that I'm using 3.8 cumulatively because of my downtimes. So you really have to, your 3-phase rates is how you get into the much lower thing, because they have to guarantee that you're going to be using power for some, you're essentially buying a chunk of power. But 3-phase is way easier to get into the 6 and 5 cent ranges. Single phase, really, it's hard to get it lower than, like you can have time of use where like your evening times are, 6 cents or 5 cents, sometimes even 3 cent from an energy rate, but all in with your distribution and everything, you might be at like 6 cents in the evenings. And on that, I would say we've built some Excel sheets out here before and sent it out on a couple of videos. If you look up like time of use and BitsBeTrippin, if you just Google that, you'll see a couple of videos we've done with an Excel sheet that I've uploaded to where you can go in there and put in your time of your time ranges, and then find the most optimal time to run your mine. So sometimes you might not be able to run 24/7, but you can run 18 hours a day and drop your cost by, so you're dropping roughly 20% of your total mining time, but you're saving like 50% of your cost. And that's when you start getting into that algebra that makes sense. So I see, hey, hobbyist, what's going on, my dude? Yeah, three phase is the goal. Three phase is hard on a residential unless you have kind of property. You usually have to be kind of near like a commercial area, or if you have three phase kind of coming through an area. Typically, they won't pull three phase to a house unless you have some more property and you're trying to do like a like a pole barn or something that makes sense for them to have the infrastructure for three phase. And that really comes down to because your high side lines are going to come in at like 12,470 volts, and then they're going to step it down to like 480 or 415. And that's an expensive transformer. And, you know, at a minimum, I think the cheapest I've seen those kind of transformers at when you start talking like 750 kVA, you're going to be in the like $40,000, you know, maybe 24,000 if they've got a kind of an older unit, $24,000 just for the transformer, right? So some power companies will, if they sign you up for a much higher load factor, they'll give that. I mean, not give it to you, but they'll charge you kind of in a blended cost for it. So you don't have to pay for the 24 up front, but like you're paying for the pad, you're paying for some of the underground to get there. And what I would say is never try to bring three phase to your house. Like just go create a proper business for your, you know, find some cheap land, put up a container, put up a mobile kind of setup to where you can lift and shift, and then turn it more into a business. That way you can, if you pay for all those infrastructure upgrades at that location, you've enhanced it. It's just like any kind of thing that you've done in business where you've put money into it. It's documented. You've now brought a capability there. You're enhancing the property by bringing something like three phase service there, which might be used by another business. If you ever wanted to lift and shift, you find a better deal. So I wouldn't try to bring three phase ever to like a home. Keep it single phase and just look at your time of use, or if you can get a commercial rate on the single phase. Yeah, I'm seeing folks talk about like EVs. I mean, there's a massive EV expansion right now, more where you have like people charging at night and stuff. And when you get in with an EV, you're getting into a space where people now are using what we would use back in the day in crypto, right? Like, so if you had 4 GPU miners, you might be using probably 1400 watts max, maybe 1800 watts, really hitting the top of a 20 amp circuit. And you might have 4 of those in your house running continuously. So now you're sitting there at what, close to 5,000 plus watts. And then you kind of YOLO a little more, maybe hit a couple 30 amp breakers in at 240. Now you're sitting there another 10,000 watts continuously. You might be pushing close to 22, 23,000 continuous load watts on your 200 amp service. And essentially an EV, for folks that aren't tracking like what an EV uses, if you have like a normal, like let's say a Tesla 60 amp charger, that's going to pull around 12 to 11.9 kW consistently. So you're roughly 12,000 watts. You're gonna have a 12,000 watt consistent load, which would be like, 8 to 10 GPU miners running at one time, or essentially roughly three ASIC miners running at full speed. So that's equivalent to what an EV charger is. And, it only charges like 4 to 6 hours, sometimes 8 hours, depending on how low your charge is on your house. So that kind of gives you an idea of, and you're not doing it every day probably, where on the, the continuous load that you would have on mining at home, you're going to put a little more strain on your network. Another thing too on the power side is, depending on how the cost of production is in the particular area that you're at, it really comes down to, this is kind of some of the pre-research that we'll do. So let's say somebody reaches out to us and says, hey, I want to see if I can get a better rate in my area. What I typically do is we do like a 1 hour consultation with somebody. And what that hour will is to understand the framework of what they're trying to do. And then we may suggest usually a 1 to 3 hour, further on consultation. I usually call it kind of like just a pre-vetting to make sure, do you really want to move on with a project? Let's do some quick checks to make sure it's even feasible. So it's like a feasibility thing that we would do through a retainer, like a 1 to 3 hour retainer. And I'm kind of giving you guys like the footprint. So if you're out there And in your particular area, you could essentially take this footprint that I'm telling you and make it for yourself once you get comfortable with it. But essentially do a 1 to 3 hour retainer, and that retainer is going to contact the power company. It's going to see if there is, like, where do they get their power from? Are they a producer of power? Is there opportunities? And I'll give you an example. I love doing it through like a use case. We worked with a person that wanted to set up a pole barn. We wanted a 3-phase service, minimum, 600 amp, single, 3-phase coming in, 750 kVA, which they could technically get a 1200 amp off of that, service. And, was it feasible? Did it make sense? And when we called the power company, it wasn't just a straight linear conversation. It starts off as, this is going to be a weird question, but we were trying to understand where you get your power. Do you buy it in tranches? Are you buying it from some larger provider? And this really comes down to the smaller municipality power companies. So if you have a bunch of co-ops in a particular area in your district, where it's not just some big monolith, like somebody like a Duke or Constellation Energy, let's say, like for our site, it's Southwestern Electric. It's a smaller co-op, 80 megawatt total capacity in the small geographic area, of which we're like 22 megawatts of it. So we're like the largest buyer of power in our area right now. So we added like 22 megawatts to their purchasing. So now I think they're a little over 100 megawatt. They get a lot of their power through British Petroleum, which is done through a handful of different operators that come in. So it's 56% wind power. It's small hydro that's in a town near us, energy mix, about 9% coal, a little bit of nuclear. It's just a big, nice energy mix, with most of it being wind. In Illinois, there's a ton of wind power that doesn't have a lot of transmission. So we were working with another person, and they were trying to set this pole barn up, smaller setup, and the town that it's in happens to be where that hydro is at. It's a small dam. It's not huge, but they're putting out about 30 megawatt in that town out to the network. So some of it does go to Southwest, some goes to a couple others. And what we found was where he's at in relation to that substation that pulls from there, when we were talking to the power company, is like, it's like an a la carte service. You go and you're commercial, and here's your rate table. Well, there was some opportunity where, we could tap the local, dam there, and maybe we can set up something near the dam, and we could just buy direct power from there, and they'll just create a new rate table that other people can do too. A lot of these things are regulated. So like if we're going to create a new rate, it needs to have a set of dimensions that allows that rate to be created. And at the end of the day, the power company is there to sell power, and they're there to provide a capability, and they're there to sell power. Even if they're a nonprofit, their job is to sell the power. So we worked with them to figure out, okay, let's set up a new rate table. The load factor, it's going to be a high 3-phase high load factor. And then essentially modeled off our original Southwest plan that we went and talked to the board and created the rate table of Southwest. So that is a kind of a outside of approach to see, are they a producer, and do they have the ability to maybe sublease some land near their production, and then we can put the mine there. Because this guy was wanting to do it at his barn, but he wasn't that far from this other location, and they have a pretty good footprint there. And it was like, could we, just shave off a piece of your property, do a lease on it, and it's right next to your substation where this capability's at. And could we, in that power purchase agreement, as it were, have a 3-year deal where we're going to be at a pretty decent rate. Here's the existing rates that we have locally. And essentially they created this rate, gave it a zone of where you could get this rate at, and just set it up to where anybody could come get it, right? And this person was going to shave it off at 750 kVA. That's really what he wanted to spend. He wasn't trying to get like all the power he could get there. He was just like, hey, I just need 750. We'll see how it goes. And maybe I expand it over time, but that kind of situation is what we're talking about. So if you find your local co-op may get creative and be able to create a new rate for the community, and then that's just the first participant in it, right? And its capability of power being there that necessarily they're not using, but they can use, and they can get the turbine running a little more. You have this also with flare gas. With the flare gas guys, you'll see this a lot where they have a generator, they can bring it, maybe get some carbon credits because there's, maybe this particular area has, to where somebody can inherit some of the carbon cost that they would normally incur. And instead of flaring it, they're using it right at the source. You expand a little more capability if you become part of the power production, because and more cost and more risk. I think personally, just seeing a few of these things play out to where if you start getting where you're also part of the power production, you got more complexity now added to your mining. But it is, if you're willing to take that risk on top of also the mining, there is that. But you want to get something that's sustainable for at least a year. All these deals, they don't last for, you can't have them running only 3 months. You got to look at this in a longer term. If you look at the life cycle of a machine and stuff. Jim C's asking, I like your current trajectory, but I miss the crazy builds in the basement. Yeah, Jim, dude, I miss it too. I miss having these with you guys. We're trying to invest more in lining up time to be able to do these AMAs and build stuff with you guys. We're doing it literally every day. Like we have two, we call them the juniors that come in, the interns, and we're actively teaching them and building stuff. And it's kind of like we could just be running a camera during this. And so I'm trying to get them comfortable with, what do we want to do and how we're going to handle that. But that is our vision, is to start to bring some of this stuff to you guys, just live. Like we're doing it every day, like literally every day. BBT East here, the workshop. We're swapping machines, we're fixing things, we're troubleshooting problems, sometimes things that we haven't ran into, and would be absolute gold to share with you guys live and really kind of get that structure in the back set up to be able to share some of those builds and stuff. And obviously I do miss a lot of the GPU stuff. The GPU stuff's fun because of the amount of people that it wasn't just us doing it, right? Like us and Red Panda and some of the other folks, like the community was doing it with us. Like it wasn't just like, oh, cool, that cool Bitcoin mine. It's big, it's expensive. It has, 3-phase power. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to get involved. Like cool story. I want to do a 6-card rig, right? I miss those. Those were fun. We have a lot of GPUs in the back that we're not using right now. I think some of those would be beneficial to have some more content around that, because it is kind of the root of where mining from an individual participant standpoint. And, services like Nice Hash and some of those other ones where you don't have to really know where you're mining initially, one-click wonder kind of stuff. I think Nice Hash is going to be kind of getting hit a little hard a little bit, because I know that they have, I think they just put out a thing where they're going to require KYC for everybody, and that's probably going to be a non-starter for most people. I'm of an opinion that I don't like the interference in like the pools and that kind of thing from that financial services kind of overreach. I think it is overreach. I think it'd be equivalent to saying like, I'm going to provide capture of telemetry on every phone call all the time, and I'm going to tap it at the phone line. Where there's institutions that do some of this stuff, like if you're trying to capture bad guys doing bad stuff, they're going to do it on an exchange side. Exchanges already have KYC AML. Trying to push that further down the line to the creation at the proof of work side, I think is kind of asinine. It creates too much overreach, and when you still get the same results downstream when you go to try to use the coin. So it's where that thing is happening. I have a difference of opinion on that. I would happily debate that with anybody out there. I understand their mind of where they're at from a capture standpoint, but I think it's the wrong approach. Mining needs to be emergent. It needs to be decentralized. It needs to be not controlled. The use of the coin, the spending aspects of crypto, like any other financial services, are going to go through its scrutiny from the risk of bad people doing bad stuff and being financed to do it. So I understand the KYC AML aspects of why those are in place, but doing it at a technical foundational level of the network layer aspect of it is just asinine to me. So the broker service gets a little graying of that area because I can see where you can get into use cases where there's some risk with that because it could be, you know, somebody that has ill-gotten gain Bitcoin buying services on NiceHash using that coin, then you are transferred that coin for your hash rate, and then they're pointing your hash rate to a pool, and they're paying a tax essentially to get fresh new coins that doesn't have that tainted history. So that's the risk with a broker service, the way NiceHash works. And I had recently built a model to show some folks that were talking about what about using NiceHash. And I've always liked the NiceHash guys. I know the NiceHash guys. We met pretty much after they had the hack and people lost money on it. And then everybody started using the BBT multi-miner. I had like 16,000 downloads in 2 days. So the multi-miner back in the day, back in 2016 timeframe. And then they were doing their recovery of trying to say, hey, you know, we were hacked. We've tried to fix this stuff. I got to know them after that because the multi-miner blew up. That was one of a few things that kind of took off when NiceHash went down. And so I got to know them and understand kind of their perspectives and where they were at. But I've always said to them that that there's always risk with a broker service because it is a place where people could wash coins technically. And I know that they're trying to put things in place to pre-forensic that because the last thing you want to do is if you have a mining, and I'm just going to roll this back. Let's say you have a miner at your house and you're like, you know what, I'm going to put this on NiceHash and I'm going to get Bitcoin for its effort. So then somebody else can point it wherever. That's all you're doing. They're a proxy service that pays for your hash rate. And then the participant that's paying for it is pointing it to another pool, and they're getting the coins using your piece of equipment, and you're getting the coins they're sending to you. So, you know, having some kind of filtration to make sure that the buyer side, there's ways to fix it. And I know I've talked to them about this. They gotta pre-vet all of those coins coming in. Where if somebody anonymously sends them coins to buy hash rate, you can't immediately put them on the market. Cause then you're at risk of, you know, bad dudes doing bad shit, trying to wash coins. And then as a participant that's just hosting that machine, you now receive those coins. And let's say you send those coins to Coinbase, and Coinbase is going to look at unknown, you know, NiceHash, unknown hop to your unknown address. You send it to Coinbase to your known address, and they're gonna be like, hey bro, that shit came from some hack. And then now you just sold your rig's hash rate to somebody that got the coins that you would have been mining for, and you still are on the hook for the power, right? So that's your risk. And that's where I'm at. All of the stuff that I usually cover on this, guys, I don't get into the politics of it. I understand why they're there, but I'm observe, report, and mechanical. What's physically, manually, and mechanically happening here. And I think that with that understanding, then you can make a good conscious decision to say, well, do I want to be part of that? What's my risk on it? You know, and as you know, a person using a service like that, that's why I haven't heard of anybody in that circumstance, the possibilities there, right? That if they didn't do KYC AML or why I can see why the KYC AML is hitting them. I don't agree that it should be hitting them. I'm just saying that they got to pre-vet on the incoming side. I think it would create a level of where you wouldn't have that much risk because they're going to pre-vet the coins coming in through Chainalysis or TRC or CipherTrace, any of the forensics companies that are out there. What's your, let's see here, some mine 10. What's your total percent of GPU, CPU, FPGA, and ASICs across your operations at this point? 99% ASIC right now. From a footprint potential, if we had everything deployed, it would be, well, it depends how you measure it. If you're measuring it on megawatts of power potential use, it would be between the joint ventures that we're part of and we own part of to the service support side that we're doing, we're close to around 96 megawatts. Now we don't own that. We own part of that, but then the amount of GPUs we still have that could be turned on is just under 3 megawatt. So, I mean, if you were to do it like that, let's just say it's 100, it'd be 3 to 4%. ASIC or FPGAs, I have a few FPGAs. It would be less than a 0.1%, right? I never went down the bitstream level. I didn't like, I don't like the culture of it. It's extremely exclusive. It's who you know, unless you know how to program a bitstream. It's just I respect it because it's a whole cult, there is a subculture to FPGAs and that's their own thing. And if you're in that bubble, great. It's just not a naturally, and nor should it be like inclusive of everybody, right? This is a very tactical piece of equipment that is needs to be tuned and created to do support. I think it's like a good test phase for some coins maybe, and then they transition to something that's more inclusive where you get just easier involvement for people. But yeah, FPGA is not so much. CPU, I didn't join a lot of the CPU stuff. I know Reporium and a couple of the other tokens out there that was really heavy CPU. I mean, back in the day, it was Monero. We did a lot of stuff with Monero back then, just trying to leverage the CPUs that we did have. But I never liked the idea of a CPU threaded 100% all the time. I just don't think I don't know the lifespan on a CPU at 100% all the time. And I just see so many things that could go wrong over the long haul if you're really pushing it hard, especially with some of the newer CPUs because they're so hot anyways, even underwater, that it just seems like something that's going to burn up. It's kind of like cell phone mining to me. Like it wasn't made to do 100% all the time. And I know people still mine with cell phones, which I think is hilarious, but like, it just wasn't it's kind of a weird, like, square peg round hole thing to me when it comes to scale on those things. So Jason Rody, man, some of these names, man, my dudes, I haven't seen you guys in a while. A long time. You got me into mining 2017, watching those late night vids on the rig videos. Dude, I love it. I love it. Love it. I love to hear it. It's been a long time since we've had some of these things here. No questions asked ever. Let's see here. Always keeps Cash App in mind for off. Always keep Cash App in mind for off ramp for nice hash BTC. I'm trying to think what you're trying to say there. Like any centralized service you send the money to, every major service is going to have some strategy if they're accepting Bitcoin to be able to check the coin. And it's either through Chainalysis, which I'm very familiar with Chainalysis. I'm actually Reactor certified. So I went through their training. I've done I understand the aspects of the forensics requirements there. And then, between peel chaining and all the other aspects that can be done from a forensics level on a obfuscated blockchain, all major players that have to comply will leverage some kind of check and balance on that aspect. So they have to even play. It's like a pay to play kind of thing. They have to check the source of the coin, of like, has it been tagged? Is it part of a hack? And it's that kind of like 3, 4, 5 step process of like, vetting out any coins that have came. And then like in the early days, like old coin, like I've had my Coinbase locked, I think at least one time. And some of it was when I was moving. We used to have a donation address back in 2013, 2014. Cause I was trying to justify buying equipment to make a channel on and buy, camera equipment, stuff I didn't have. And so we were like, hey, if you want better, higher quality content, what you see is what you get. A 720p camera. Well, I'd love to get a 1080p. Can't really justify. I have a couple of young kids. And people would donate, and those donations, we would sell on Coinbase and then buy a piece of equipment. And I would show kind of like, hey, you guys donated this. This is the result of it. And I had to show up a camera or whatever. And one of them was from the Silk Road. So, they froze an account and we're like, hey, here's the deal. And I'm like, well, you can see the address I got. And I don't know who the other person was. And I thank them for their donation. However, it was coins that was like a unspent transaction output from a known dark web address. So then somebody was just, I guess, liking the content and then just donated off of a dark web address. So you do run into that, not so much anymore probably, but like back in the BTCE days and all those kind of things where those exchanges that were less than ideal, Satoshi dice, all that stuff, you run into some legacy coin that starts moving around and end up hitting you. But any of these sources, Cash App, Fidelity, Robinhood, anybody that starts to let coins go from point A to point B, are going to go through some level of forensics. And you got some kind of like pre-vetted or vetted coin. And it's kind of like a color coins. All Bitcoin, all cryptos in general are fungible. They should be whatever the spot price is, and that's, your market rate on them. But there is a color of coin kind of situation where mined coins is the cleanest coins you could have. And if you have any kind of weight on the overhead, if you have a society and all the regulatory requirements and all these larger entities, what's going to happen is you have this formation of what is more complex research versus uncomplex research. So new coins are like the smoothest thing, right? It's brand new, came from the source, straight from the source, straight into like an ETF. They love the OTC trades from freshly mined coins. There's no forensics on it, right? It didn't go through a dark web. It didn't go through anything. It literally was mined by the miner into their address, one hop straight to the order book, right? So it's the cleanest, smoothest, not a lot of forensics required. You get coins from back in the day and it's going through a due diligence, essentially. Like, was this bad shit or not? It's just pain. Here. I doubt I'm large enough volume BTC cells from nice hash to trigger any type of major scrutiny. I think it just comes down to the basic level. Like, let's say you're earning $5,800 and it comes down to where they're probably not going to go trigger a new alert on you. But like if they're seeing a chunk, like a tranche, anybody that's trying to move money in a negative way, it has some kind of forensics on them. They're going to, or let's say they're a hack and they're trying to like, let's wash these coins, let's use nice hash, whatever. They're going to buy as much hash rate as they can, and then they're going to try to get new fresh coins, right? And the nice hash becomes an unfortunate target for that, right? Same thing with any of the broker services in general, and that's part of the custodial risk you have with like selling your hardware to a broker service. Now I know that they're trying to make sure that that's not an issue for you to inherit, but like it comes at the expense of KYCing AML now. And like, again, why I'm pushing back on that from the concept of that is when you have obviously the privacy aspects of it, right? But anytime you start giving a whole bunch of information, passport information, direct details, intimate details of your life to a company, now you're inheriting whatever their security model is to protect your information. And like, we should be pushing to a world of less of that requirement, and then focusing where the big transactional assets are happening and focusing on those transactions versus narrowing it down to the it's kind of the same thing that we run into like with the shoe bomber and shoes in an airport. A very bad person tried to do something terrible on a plane with shoes. And now everybody in the damn planet has to take their shoes off at the airport. And it's one of those kind of broad stroke things. There's not a really good answer for it, but maybe functional technology, where we're walking through something that can search it better, something to where you're not having this friction in the system. And I think if you push to the edges a lot of that friction, it just slows everything down. It makes it uncomfortable for everybody because now it's a many to many issue, and now you're just creating friction in the whole system. And this is, I think, part and parcel of just my background in history and like being like Lean Six Sigma, green belt, black belt, person. Like I look at processes and I go and fix them. Like if it's impact or slowing things down, and I just see something like that, and I'm just like, they're getting it wrong. That's not the place to do it. There's other places to do it. But, it's going to be kind of a back and forth, I think, for a while people start to figure out the tech stack in the financial services aspect. What's the easiest way to off ramp large amounts? I've heard of bank accounts getting closed, getting deposits from your crypto companies. What are they paying the bills off in this bull run? So first, number one, it's actually a really good question, especially if you're doing something at scale. And I'm seeing this with a couple companies right now that we've been working with that are having some issues right now because they put crypto in their name, and that it never helps on right now with the way the scrutiny is with banks and stuff. The having a good banking relationship, I do two things I recommend to everybody. Get out of the big four, period. And it's not nothing that they're just absolutely terrible and bad. We could all get into a philosophical conversation of why Bank of America and everybody else like that is terrible on certain things. I've had terrible experiences with them. And it isn't direct. It's more of a broad stroke in general of just most all the things. And it's just like where it's too big of a company and they don't understand individual issues. And then it's just like you're talking to a person that's just working there and it's like, hey man, I'm just here doing my job. And that's the mentality, right? That's the problem with big company approaches, is that the rank and file on the ground can't do anything about it anyways. So you're kind of yelling into this echo chamber of nothing where you're just hearing yourself and nothing happens. So I take all business that I can to the smaller bank footprint. We have a local bank here in this area in Southern Illinois that we use, and I have personal relationships with those, individuals. I went and talked to the president of the bank. I've talked to their fraud department. We've gave presentations to them. We've also been hired to go in and talk to other people's banks. We have presentations for that. We set them down to understand how the forensic side. This is part of the reason why I went and did got Chainalysis certified on the forensic side to understand the whole back end of how law enforcement works with judiciary groups to figure out audit and all that. Like you got to have a baseline of understanding of that to help get the banks to feel comfortable with it, but start small on the bank side. Get them to where they're comfortable with what you're doing, understand, invite them to the location. We've invited the banks out to our locations to understand like what's going on mechanically, what's going on from how we're getting paid, how's the frequency come into Coinbase. Like we've really exposed like the process, right? And the better comfortable understanding that they have and a more working relationship, then if they got a question, they can pick up the phone and ask us. And you got to work with a smaller bank, and all you're doing is you're bringing your footprint down to where there's less folks involved or that are the decision makers. And that helps a lot if you're working with a smaller bank. So if you have a local community bank or a smaller bank that is awesome at it, and, you can work your business through them. Now, banks are extremely limited on the crypto aspect, so they can't do a lot of direct crypto stuff. But our bank working with us understands that how the Coinbase aspects or Uphold or a couple of the different exchanges we use to convert crypto when we need to pay power bills, and they understand that those wires that come in are where they're coming from. I've offered them visibility on that transaction detail. It was kind of a leaning forward. Did they need it? No, but I brought it to them to let them understand the mechanics of how it works. Now, what that gives us is a comfortability of how that's coming in. And that if at any point that they were ever audited from a larger institution, because a lot of these smaller banks are underfunded, not underfunded, they're underwritten by a larger bank. They have some kind of agreement to convert cash and stuff at scale for them. And at some point they may get, a call to say, hey, what's going on with this, larger amounts that are coming in and coming back out and that kind of thing. So having a better working relationship with your local bank, a smaller entity, and then just going in and having a conversation with them before you even open an account. Just kind of lay it out, work with what you're doing. And then once you get some kind of movement and they start seeing the capital coming in, and that maybe you're working with a private equity or somebody else that's funding you, to buy the bigger stuff. And a lot of it's going to be cash, just coming out of an investment or an account, and then they go buy. You have to buy the hardware, buy the machines, all that kind of stuff. Then you can have some traffic that you can then go back to and show to the bank that if you're trying to now get a loan on some of the other tangential stuff. So it's very hard to try to get a loan for Bitcoin miners, but some of the infrastructure stuff, the building, property, that stuff, that's their day job, right? So they take away the fact of what like the crypto aspect is, and more of understanding that it's a business that generates revenue, and flipping on them that the revenue is with the power rates that you have is a more guarantee, because when you're mining to a pool, your payouts, you don't have, it's not like receivables. Like us, BBT, like we have multiple threads going from advisory roles to consulting stuff that we're doing. We have a total of, now we had 9, we're at 7 people right now that are doing stuff, and we're billing for those things, right? And sometimes we put invoices out and they don't always get paid on time, where in Bitcoin, I'm paid all the time, like clockwork, and I don't have to wait for those receivables. So my counter argument to them is saying, at least in Bitcoin, I know that I'm getting paid. At least in some of these other cryptocurrencies, because of the nature of the pay schedule of the block time and my participation, I'm distributed on a regular basis. I have a better guarantee, and I'd argue that it's a more guaranteed type of situation. The risk factor, and I tell them the risk is that as long as my power rate doesn't switch on me and I have some regulatory thing, that's my outstanding risk that I can't really control, that I try to bit the best situation moving forward, to move forward with a business, right? But like, it's just getting those good, comfortable local places, and sometimes you have to travel. Like we've had people come here, look at sites, they meet with the bank that we use. And since there's multiple people that use that bank now that are in the crypto space, like they've now started receiving other crypto clients, because they're just like, you don't have to explain it again to them. Right. So, I mean, I know that they're excited for whenever this bipartisan bill gets through and they can actually get charters to host crypto. Like they're in, like, they're going to be like, we're going to see as fast as we can get, because they're excited about the future of it. And I think cultivating, a local, capital partner, if it's a bank or if it's just an institution of some sort, is critically viable in expanding it. All right, my dudes, we're just over 1 hour. I'm going to answer a couple more questions and then we'll wrap this one up. Hopefully this has been valuable. I haven't had one of these in a while for you guys. I'd like some feedback if this is looking good. From a just from an AMA. I haven't done one in a while. Trying to, we get a ton of questions all the time. See if you guys like this kind of content. It's been a minute since I've done it. Let's see here. If I had any more that I had missed here. I had one. What's the top 3 things you look for when you're scouting a new mining site? Number 1 is power rate. Number 1, no question. What's the rate? That's the first door. First door, if you can't make it through the rate, and our current rate right now is you got to be 4 or 5 cents or lower, all in, no questions. That's the rate. Now there might be terms to that 4 or 5 cents, like it is here. Like we have to hit our curtailments to hit that 4 or 5 cents. Otherwise, it goes to like 5.2. Like if I just mined through it and never curtailed, I'd be paying 5.2. But that's number 1. Number 2 is it's got to be in the right zoned area. I don't want to have issues with people not liking it or sound or any of that. It's got to be geographically in a place that makes sense for it. Is it by a substation? What's my cost factor? Trying to lower my cost as much as possible. Is a lease possible versus having to buy? Is there you know, those kind of aspects. But I mean, we cover all of these kind of things, like build plans, all that kind of stuff. Shameless plug for the website, my dudes, BitsBeTrippin.io. We have some new drip out there too, if you guys want some awesome clothing options here. Red Panda. Can I work for you? Yes, everything in Canada moved to where you are. My dude, we'll do some expansion here. I'll hit you up. Imagine Red Panda and BBT combining. Let's go. Wonder Twins with superpowers. Let's plug here. So we got two things coming up here. With regards to, we're going to have a newsletter. So when you hit the website, you can sign up for a newsletter. And we're just trying to bring some of the content and channel that into Word form on a newsletter. It's free to sign up if you want content from us. And then of course I had to hit the new drip here when it comes to some clothing. You know, we try to keep it pretty cheap. I mean, it's sweatshirt for $25, my dudes. We're not, you know, it's not $50 or anything like that. But we do have some new drip out there, new clothing, cups, all kinds of fun stuff. And then of course you always have the solution and support stuff. Right there on, it's BitsBeTrippin.io. And you know, that's, you know, we can get some of our folks out. Sometimes you get me, you know, you can schedule a call, do all this stuff. Those are kind of the services and stuff we've expanded to. It's part of the reason why we haven't had a ton of content, but we are working on that, of bringing some more regular content. You're going to see BBT moving from just like all of our stuff that's on here is going to be crypto centric. I'm taking all the other like fun things that I was doing. I'm going to have that on a separate channel. So if it's stuff with Cybertruck, cars, you know, we do a lot of stuff with like exotic cars and stuff. I never really share it that much, but like all that kind of other tangential stuff that we're doing, I'm going to have on my other channel, which is going to be just more personalized stuff, but it's just kind of more the aspect of what like my day-to-day is. That's not necessarily always crypto. So if you're interested in that, you'll see that. Stay tuned on you know, all the normal socials. You'll see that get posted up there. I post a lot on X, but we'll be doing that too. So awesome, my dudes. Thanks, Red Panda, for sharing that link, my dude. If you guys post questions on YouTube, I'll see if I can get some of those answers too. If I missed anything, and we'll catch you guys on this next one. Hopefully this was good. We'll try to do a regular live stream with you guys if we can weekly. But we're going to try to start getting back into some more of this for you guys. So thanks for participating. Thanks for some of the questions. It was great. And I will answer the ones that are on X and on YouTube comments later on over this weekend as I go through it, my dudes. It was great seeing you guys, hearing from you guys on the chat.